I'm Stephen Foskett, organizer of Tech Field Day and Gestalt IT, and I am here learning more about some of the companies that we've seen at Tech Field Day and Gestalt IT at AWS reInvent.
Hi, I'm Mike Palmer. I am the Chief Product Officer here at Druva.
And I'm Stephen Manley, the Chief Technologist at Druva.
So we are here learning more about AWS's announcements. It seems to me that one of the key things that Amazon is doing with AWS is trying to make it more usable by enterprise customers. We just heard a big announcement about Amazon AWS Outposts, for example, and I know that Druva really has a similar philosophy in terms of bringing enterprises into this cloud environment. Is that right?
That is right. One of the stats that really hit me from Andy Jassy's presentation this morning was the rather small percentage of IT spend that is actually in the cloud today, despite the size of this conference, something like 3%. What it tells you is there are a lot of customers hanging on to hybrid environments, and they're going to need more sophisticated services than they've been offered up to date.
And because of that, it seems like this is, even though, as you said, this is a huge conference. I mean, I've heard that there's over 60,000 people involved. This is just starting from an enterprise perspective, is that right?
Yeah, you can think of, again, what we're spending in cloud is the very tip of the iceberg. And I think it's not just in terms of how much people spend, but the effect that this is going to have on really IT administrators' lives. We see a lot of people who are trying to figure out how they're going to map their career and their positions from a traditional on-premises world into a cloud world. So it's just the start for not just the technology and the revenue, but also the people.
And that's a really interesting concept, because essentially what you're saying is that there's a parallel between how companies are architecturally approaching the cloud and how people are approaching their careers within the cloud. That's a perspective I hadn't really thought about. Are you hearing this from people? Are you hearing that people are trying to sort of relaunch themselves into this new world?
Well, I think one of the trends in our own particular space in data protection and storage is that our traditional premises user, is retiring out or looking to move their career on to a more versatile style role. If you listened to the conference just this morning, you would have heard a lot of talk about SageMaker, about database transitions, about a lot of things that really are helping developers build applications faster in the cloud. Not a lot about infrastructure management anymore. In fact, a lot of emphasis on simplifying that. And frankly, that's what Druva has stood for, and where we're going to continue to emphasize, is how do we take the complexity out of storage management? How do we drive cost savings for a customer year over year? How do we support more applications? How do we do faster deployments? That's what we're hearing from our users. Take that work away from me so I can pivot my career to do the next thing.
Yeah, and in fact, one of the things that I've talked to a lot of customers about is there's this concept of kind of a three-stage journey for them as they move their career to the cloud. And so the first one that we talk to a lot of people about is, get a quick early win, build up your credibility in the organization, show that you're part of the new wave as opposed to holding on to the old wave. And then enable others to get to the cloud so that you establish yourself as a leader. And then finally, as Mike was talking about, keep adding value on that data that you've brought to the cloud, whether it's with SageMaker or other analytics tools, so that you can be relevant, not just in terms of what your job used to be, but setting yourself up for the future.
So I know that Druva as well has had some announcements here, and I know that you guys were eagerly awaiting the opportunity to speak more about Outposts.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit more about what you're doing there?
Sure. So first of all, Outposts has been a long-awaited development from AWS. That was something that was announced last year, and it is now becoming generally available and will ship as of this conference. We've been doing a lot of testing with the Outposts team because we know that our user is in this hybrid mode. Our user is typically using a lot of VMware, a lot of NAS-style deployments on premises, but on that journey that Stephen mentioned. And Outposts is a nice way to offer them the benefit of cloud-based deployments with some of the maybe higher performance or lower latency style responsiveness that they're used to with premises appliances. So we are announcing support for Outposts, both in terms of Outposts as an infrastructure that can be leveraged to run our software, but also as one that we support through our native support for EC2, EBS, and as we heard today, soon to be S3.
So I know you've been working on this for quite a while. That's big news, I think, and it really does reflect the changing enterprise architecture. Are there other big announcements that Druva's making here?
Should we talk about S3 backup?
I think that's a big one. So one of the things you see for people who've already gone into the cloud or they're developing cloud native applications, one of the things they've started to realize is just having my data in object storage isn't enough. And so they want extra protection. They want to be able to recover that data, and they may want to even be able to tier that to lower cost storage over time. And so that's one of the things that we've been working on is, just like bad stuff could happen on your premises and you wanted to protect it, bad stuff can still happen in the cloud, and so we help them protect the data there as well.
Another thing that Andy Jassy mentioned on stage today with the keynotes, it was again and again we heard about analytics and machine learning and how the cloud is gathering data and enabling that data to be used by cloud infrastructure as well as enterprises. How does Druva fit into that picture?
So one of the important things to understand about your backup data in general is that it's your most diverse data set, typically your largest data set as well. And one of the things that has held back many enterprises when they've looked at this analytics opportunity was the lack of the ability to take that kind of data and then marry it with compute services. Amazon's obviously changed the game for that from an infrastructure point of view, but what we heard a lot about today were tools then to help organize that data, to allow many different types of models to be run against it. Simplicity was a big theme, so the ability to do analytics even as a novice style practitioner. Druva's role in this is pretty significant. We are a data mover, so the ability to take large, diverse data sets, house them in S3, make them available through an API to these types of services is a great stepping stone that's in budget, because data protection is always in budget. It's a data set that typically goes unused 95% of the time, because you're not restoring most of the time, but now can be used for these sort of next generation use cases. So we think we not only fit very well in the legacy retirement of appliances and secondary storage and software, but we also fit in the next generation world of leveraging data for more interesting machine learning and analytics purposes.
And I think one of the things that, just to double down on what Mike said, as someone who sort of comes from a more traditional infrastructure background, there were always two challenges I had with being able to do AI, ML, all those sorts of things. The first was, it was too expensive to be able to buy dedicated infrastructure. Well, now that Druva gets my data in the cloud, I can spin things up temporarily and then spin them down, and it's not this persistent cost. And then the second one was, I didn't have a degree in ML and AI. I didn't know what I was doing. And the fact that these tools get easier, you use something like an AWS SageMaker, it makes it so much easier to actually get insights out of the data for even somebody that doesn't have a deep mathematics background. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, and I think that's the another aspect back to the beginning of this conversation is that the cloud is really transforming what people do, not just what architectures are. And it's important, I think, to have that focus and that openness to new ideas. One of the things here at reInvent that's really remarkable is the focus on basically playing with things and experimenting and learning. There's a whole section of hackers and code and learning, and I think that really goes to the true nature of cloud. And is that something that Druva can play in as well? You mentioned that the data is there. You've got APIs and so on. Is that something that you guys can play in the future?
And not just in the ability to play with data and using training sets and the type of terminology that those of us without PhD in AI and ML might not understand as well. Having said that, the user experience is critical here, and we heard it over and over in the presentation this morning. It drives a lot of the change at an enterprise, and it's an area we're super proud of because we have revolutionized, frankly, what data protection is meant from a deployment point of view. We've taken the idea of a deployment, which has been a 3 and 6 month process, and turned it into a 20-minute process. We are able to retire data centers at a rate that most other vendors, including AWS, would be jealous of. The idea that a novice user in 15 or 20 minutes could be not only a new user to us, but then initiate a backup and be leveraging our tool is quite remarkable in the industry. So this idea of rapid adoption, of playing to the versatilists, of making a better user experience, wrapping all of that around cost reductions over time. These are the things that cloud really stood for, AWS in particular stood for, and that we're well within the wave, as you said earlier, the wave that we're following.
For me, one of the interesting things is I've hung around the booth here. The number of people I've met that have come to me and said things like, yeah, this was something I'd never even played with before, and now I'm using this technology. I've already shown a win in my business. And by the way, like every week I get to show my boss something cool, like, did you know this is happening? Because I'm able to get interesting insight out of the data. That's been huge, right? And again, it goes back to what we were talking about. It takes someone from a career where they said, I'm not sure where I'm going next, to someone who says, you know, the sky's the limit. I'm connected into the business. I'm really relevant, and I'm really excited about my future. And so that, I think, for me, has been one of the nice things about this conference, is just seeing the number of people who use Druva who feel so good about where their career's going.
Yeah. Thank you very much for watching us. If you enjoyed this video, please do check us out at gestaltit.com. You can also find us on YouTube. Just search for Gestalt IT. If you're interested in learning more about Druva, just go to techfieldday.com or youtube.com/techfieldday, where you can find a lot more technical deep dive videos about Druva. Now, where can we find more if somebody wants to contact you about the company or the products?
And of course, you can always go to druva.com and find not only information about Druva and its services, you can also conduct a free trial, use TCO calculators, and many other things there.
Thanks, guys.